Ma'am, I said hands where I can see them. This is your final warning. Officer Sullivan's voice boomed across the quiet library reading room. The afternoon sun filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across oak tables where a dozen patrons sat frozen, watching the scene unfold. Evelyn Washington didn't move from her chair. Her fingers remained on the pages of the education funding report she'd been studying for the past 3 hours. Around her, carefully organized folders lay spread in color-coded precision: blue for statistics, green for legislative history, yellow for community impact studies. "Officer, I'm simply reading," Evelyn said, her voice steady despite the weight of authority pressing down on the space. "These are public documents from this library's reference section." The Riverside Public Library had always been a sanctuary. The brass plaque by the entrance proclaimed it clearly: Public Library Hours, 9 a.m. 8 p.m. All community members welcome. No library card required for reading room access. Those words had been etched there since 1967, a promise to the community that knowledge belonged to everyone. Officer Brett Sullivan stepped closer, his hand hovering near his utility belt. His partner, a younger officer whose badge read Martinez, shifted nervously by the reference desk. Between them and Evelyn, head librarian Margaret Thornton stood with her arms crossed, her pale face flushed with righteous indignation. "She's been here for hours," Thornton declared, though the accusation sounded hollow even to the gathering crowd. "Just sitting there, taking up space." The security guard, Dennis Cooper, nodded eagerly from his position by the door. His hand gripped his radio like a lifeline, ready to call for more backup at the slightest provocation. The handcuffs on Sullivan's belt caught the light as he unclipped them. The metallic sound echoed in the sudden silence. Evelyn's hands remained perfectly still on her documents. The handcuffs click once, then twice, and that's when everything changes. 3 hours earlier, the Riverside Public Library had been peaceful. Evelyn Washington pushed through the heavy glass doors at precisely 1 o'clock. Her leather messenger bag weighted with notebooks and her laptop. The afternoon stretched ahead, perfect for the research she needed to complete. She'd blocked out her entire afternoon for this, clearing her usually packed schedule to focus on understanding the intricate details of educational funding allocation. The library's main hall soared 3 stories high, its 19th-century architecture preserved despite modern renovations. Evelyn had been coming here for 15 years, long before her current position, back when she was just another community member trying to understand how systems worked, how change happened, how laws translated into real impacts on real people. The marble floors echoed with footsteps, a sound she'd always found comforting, like the heartbeat of a place dedicated to learning. "Library card?" Margaret Thornton's voice cut through Evelyn's appreciation of the familiar space. The head librarian stood behind the circulation desk, though Evelyn hadn't approached it. "I'm just using the reading room," Evelyn replied pleasantly. "The sign says no card required for that." Thornton's thin lips pressed together. Her eyes swept over Evelyn's professional blazer, her neat braids, her quality bag, seeming to catalog and dismiss each item. "We still like to know who's using our facilities," Thornton said, her tone suggesting this was less request than requirement. Evelyn pulled out her library card anyway, the plastic worn soft from years of use. Thornton examined it longer than necessary, turning it over twice, holding it up to the light as if checking for forgery, typing the number into her computer with deliberate slowness before sliding it back across the counter without a word. The reading room occupied the library's east wing, a haven of natural light and quiet focus. Evelyn selected her usual spot, third table from the window, left side, where she could spread out materials while maintaining a clear view of both entrances. Old habits from years of needing to be aware of her surroundings, of knowing when someone was approaching with questions or complaints or accusations. She unpacked methodically. 3 different colored sets of folders emerged first, each containing different aspects of the education funding research she was conducting. Blue folders held statistical analyses from the past 5 years. Charts showing the steady decline in per-student spending. Graphs illustrating the correlation between funding cuts and dropout rates. Green contained legislative histories, tracking how similar bills had succeeded or failed in other states, with careful annotations about which strategies worked and which faced insurmountable opposition. Yellow housed community impact studies, real stories from real families affected by underfunded schools, testimonials she'd gathered over months of listening sessions. Her notebook came out next, already filled with 24 pages of handwritten observations. She preferred writing by hand for certain tasks, finding that the physical act of writing helped her process complex information differently than typing. The notebook's margins were filled with questions, connections, and reminder notes written in her precise script. Within minutes, she had 4 documents open simultaneously: a funding report from 2019, current year allocations, a comparative study from Michigan, and handwritten notes from yesterday's community meeting. Her eyes moved between them in practiced patterns, finding connections, noting discrepancies, building a comprehensive understanding that would inform her work. She'd developed this system over years, this ability to synthesize multiple sources quickly and accurately. Dennis Cooper made his first pass at 1:30. The security guard's heavy footsteps announced him before his reflection appeared in Evelyn's laptop screen. He walked slowly behind her chair, paused, then continued to the next table where an elderly white man sat reading newspapers. Cooper nodded pleasantly at the man, even exchanged a few words about the weather, and moved on without lingering. At 1:45, Cooper passed again. This time he stopped directly behind Evelyn's chair. She could smell his cologne, aggressively pine-scented, as he stood there for a full 30 seconds before moving on. She made a small notation in her notebook, not about education funding, but about the time and duration of his presence. Documentation had become second nature to her over the years. 2 o'clock brought Thornton herself, wheeling a cart of books that needed reshelving. The head librarian's route through the reading room seemed oddly circuitous, bringing her past Evelyn's table 3 times despite the fact that no books needed to be shelved in that section. The cart's squeaky wheel announced each approach, a sharp counterpoint to the library's usual quiet. "That's a lot of materials," Thornton commented on her second pass, peering at Evelyn's spread of documents with obvious disapproval. "Research," Evelyn responded simply, not looking up from her cross-referencing. "What kind of research?" Thornton pressed, actually stopping her cart this time. "Educational," Evelyn said, turning a page in the Michigan report. She'd learned long ago that short answers often discouraged further interrogation, though they sometimes had the opposite effect with those determined to find fault. "For what purpose?" Thornton continued, her voice carrying an edge of suspicion that seemed wildly disproportionate to the situation. "Understanding funding mechanisms," Evelyn replied, maintaining her neutral tone despite the irritation building in her chest. Thornton huffed and pushed her cart away, but not before making a show of examining Evelyn's workspace, as if memorizing every detail for some future report. By 2:15, Cooper had made his 3rd pass. This time he actually touched the back of Evelyn's chair, a casual gesture that might have seemed accidental if not for the pattern already established. His fingers lingered just long enough to be inappropriate, not quite long enough to be actionable. Evelyn shifted slightly forward, creating distance without acknowledgement. A young mother with two small children entered the reading room at 2:30. The woman was Latina, her children well-behaved but clearly excited about their library visit. They whispered to each other in Spanish, pointing at the high ceiling with wonder. Thornton appeared within minutes, as if summoned by some silent alarm. "The children's section is downstairs," Thornton announced, though the children were sitting quietly with picture books their mother had brought to the table. "They're fine here with me," the mother replied softly. "We're just reading together." "It's policy," Thornton insisted, though no such policy was posted anywhere Evelyn could see. "The reading room is for serious study." The mother gathered her children and left, shooting an apologetic glance at the other patrons. The little girl dropped one of her books, and when Evelyn bent to help pick it up, Thornton actually stepped between them, retrieving the book herself and handing it to the mother with a tight smile that suggested she should hurry along. Evelyn made another note in her margins, this time about selective policy enforcement. She'd been documenting these kinds of patterns for years, these small acts of exclusion that added up to systematic discrimination. Cooper's fourth pass came at 2:45, fifth at 3, sixth at 3:15. Each time he slowed near her table, sometimes pretending to check the emergency exit that hadn't needed checking the previous 5 times, sometimes adjusting the window blinds that were perfectly fine, sometimes simply standing in her peripheral vision until she could no longer pretend not to notice him. "Everything all right here?" Cooper asked on his 6th pass, addressing the question to the room at large, but looking directly at Evelyn. "Perfect," she replied, her tone professionally neutral. She'd sat through enough depositions, enough hearings, enough confrontations to know that emotion gave ammunition to those looking for excuses. At 3:20, she heard Thornton speaking quietly on the phone at the circulation desk. The words "suspicious" and "refuse to comply" drifted across the quiet space. At 3:30, the police arrived. Officer Brett Sullivan entered the library like he owned it, his heavy boots announcing each step against the marble floor. Behind him, Officer Kyle Martinez moved more cautiously, his younger face scanning the reading room as if expecting immediate danger. They hadn't announced themselves at the entrance, hadn't checked in at the circulation desk, hadn't followed any of the standard protocols for responding to a non-emergency call. "That's her," Thornton said immediately, pointing across the reading room at Evelyn. "She's been here for hours, refusing to follow library policies." Sullivan's hand moved to rest on his utility belt, a practiced gesture of intimidation. He approached Evelyn's table with the kind of aggressive confidence that came from years of never being questioned. Martinez flanked from the left, creating a tactical position that seemed absurdly excessive for a library reading room. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you," Sullivan announced, his voice deliberately loud enough to draw attention from every patron in the room. Evelyn looked up from her documents slowly, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "Good afternoon, officers," she said calmly. "How can I help you?" "We've received a complaint about your behavior," Sullivan said, moving closer to her table. "You're going to need to gather your things and leave." "I'm sorry, but what behavior specifically?" Evelyn asked, setting down her pen carefully. "I've been sitting here quietly conducting research," Thornton interjected from behind the officers. "She's been monopolizing library resources, refusing to consolidate her materials when asked, and creating a hostile environment for other patrons," she declared. Evelyn glanced around the nearly empty reading room. The elderly man with his newspapers hadn't even looked up. 2 college students at a far table continued typing on their laptops. "Which patrons have I disturbed?" she asked. "Don't get smart with us," Sullivan warned, his tone shifting to open hostility. "When we tell you to leave, you leave." "Officer, I believe there's been a misunderstanding, Evelyn said, maintaining her measured tone. I'm using the public library during public hours. I have a valid library card, which I've already shown to Ms. Thornton. I'm not violating any posted rules. She's being deliberately difficult, Thornton added, as if providing evidence of a crime. She's been like this all afternoon. Martinez shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, can I see some identification? He asked, his voice notably less aggressive than his partner's. My library card should be sufficient for using library services, Evelyn replied. Unless you're suggesting I'm suspected of committing a crime. Now you're refusing to identify yourself, Sullivan said, taking another step closer. That's obstruction. Actually, that's not what obstruction means under state law, Evelyn said quietly. Obstruction requires actively impeding an investigation of criminal activity. What criminal activity am I suspected of? Sullivan's face reddened. Are you a lawyer or something? He demanded. I'm a citizen who knows her rights, Evelyn answered. The documentation is quite clear on what constitutes probable cause for demanding identification. The word documentation seemed to trigger something in Sullivan. His stance widened, his hand moving from resting on his belt to actively gripping his radio. She just threatened me, he announced loudly. I did no such thing, Evelyn said, her voice still steady but with an edge of steel entering it. I referenced legal documentation. That's not a threat by any definition. Ma'am, let's just make this easy, Martinez tried to interject, clearly uncomfortable with his partner's escalation. If you could just gather your things. I'm not finished with my research, Evelyn interrupted. The library doesn't close for another 5 hours. Unless you can articulate a lawful reason for requiring me to leave, I'd like to continue my work. Cooper had moved closer during the exchange, positioning himself to block the nearest exit. 3 other patrons had started recording with their phones, though they kept their distance. She's refusing to comply with lawful orders, Sullivan announced, loud enough for the phones to pick up clearly. Ma'am, I'm ordering you to pack up your materials and leave the premises immediately. On what grounds? Evelyn asked. What law have I broken? What ordinance have I violated? You can't simply order citizens to leave public spaces without cause. The library staff wants you gone, Sullivan said. That's trespassing. The library is a public accommodation, Evelyn countered. They can't arbitrarily ban patrons without legitimate cause. That would violate both state public accommodation laws and federal civil rights statutes. Sullivan's hand moved to his handcuffs. Now, you're definitely being a lawyer, he snarled, and a difficult one at that. Knowledge of one's rights doesn't make one difficult, Evelyn said. It makes one informed. There's a difference between following lawful orders and submitting to unlawful demands. Stand up, Sullivan commanded suddenly. Right now. Am I being detained? Evelyn asked. I said, stand up, Sullivan repeated. Officer, that's not an answer to my question, Evelyn said. Am I being detained, or am I free to go? Martinez looked increasingly worried. Maybe we should call for a supervisor, he suggested to his partner. We don't need a supervisor, Sullivan snapped. We need compliance. Evelyn slowly began gathering her papers, maintaining eye contact with Sullivan. I'm going to pack my materials now, she said clearly. I'm moving slowly and deliberately, so there's no misunderstanding of my intentions. She stood carefully, reaching for her blue folders first. Sullivan suddenly grabbed her wrist as she reached across the table. Too fast, he declared, though she'd been moving with deliberate slowness. That was a threatening gesture. Officer, you're touching me without cause, Evelyn said, her voice remaining steady despite the grip on her wrist. Please release my arm. You reached suddenly, Sullivan insisted, tightening his grip. I perceived a threat. I reached for my research folders, Evelyn clarified, which you watched me do. This is excessive force for a non-criminal encounter. Everything's a legal argument with you, Sullivan said, yanking her arm to pull her away from the table. Evelyn didn't resist, but didn't assist either, making her body dead weight. Officer Martinez, are you witnessing this? She asked the younger officer. Your partner is using physical force without articulating any criminal suspicion. Martinez stepped forward nervously. Brett, maybe we should back me up or shut up, Sullivan cut him off. He pulled Evelyn's other arm behind her back, forcing her into a control position. You're being detained for suspicious behavior and failure to comply with lawful orders. What specific behavior was suspicious? Evelyn asked, even as Sullivan forced her arms into an uncomfortable position. Reading? Taking notes? Being black in a public library? Now you're making this racial, Sullivan announced loudly, clearly performing for the recording phones. I never mentioned race. You didn't have to, Evelyn replied. The pattern speaks for itself. How many white patrons has Ms. Thornton called the police on this month? Thornton's face flushed. This has nothing to do with race, she protested. Then what does it have to do with? Evelyn asked. What exactly did I do that warranted calling the police? You were loitering, Cooper suddenly announced, as if he'd just remembered the right word. Loitering in a public library? Evelyn's tone carried a note of incredulity. During operational hours? While actively reading and taking notes? Sullivan had heard enough. He pulled out his handcuffs, the metal gleaming under the fluorescent lights. That's it, he declared. You're under arrest. For what charge? Evelyn asked. We'll figure that out at the station, Sullivan replied, beginning to position the handcuffs. That's not how arrests work, Evelyn said. You need probable cause for a specific crime. What crime do you suspect me of committing? Disorderly conduct, trespassing, obstruction of justice, and whatever else I can think of, Sullivan said, his professionalism completely abandoned. The handcuffs clicked once around Evelyn's right wrist. The sound echoed through the silent library. Every patron was now watching, most still recording. Martinez had stepped back, his hand on his radio, clearly considering calling for that supervisor despite his partner's orders. The handcuff hung from Evelyn's right wrist like a metal accusation, the other cuff still open in Sullivan's grip. The reading room had transformed into a theater. Every patron now an unwilling audience member to this performance of power and resistance. Does anyone else feel unsafe? Thornton suddenly announced to the room, her voice pitched to Carrie. This woman has been creating a hostile environment all afternoon. The elderly man with his newspapers finally looked up, confusion clear on his weathered face. I haven't noticed anything, he said mildly. Thornton's eyes narrowed. Well, you've been absorbed in your reading, Harold. You might not have noticed her aggressive behavior. What aggressive behavior? Harold asked, genuinely puzzled. She's been quieter than the air conditioning. Cooper stepped forward, his security uniform giving him an air of authority he clearly relished. Sir, we've been monitoring the situation all afternoon, he said importantly. There have been multiple incidents. What incidents? One of the college students called out, her phone still recording. We've been here for 2 hours. She hasn't done anything except read. You don't know what happened before you arrived, Cooper said quickly. She's been problematic for weeks. That's a lie, Evelyn said calmly, though the handcuff made her position awkward. I haven't been to this library in over a month before today. I'm sure your sign-in records would confirm that. We don't keep those kinds of records, Thornton said too quickly, then seemed to realize her mistake. Actually, You do, the second college student said. You made me sign in with my ID last week because you said the computer system tracks usage for funding purposes. Thornton's face flushed darker. That's different, she insisted. How? The student pressed. Sullivan yanked Evelyn's left arm back, trying to position the second handcuff. Everyone needs to stay back, he ordered. This is police business. A middle-aged white woman entered the reading room, taking in the scene with widening eyes. Thornton immediately rushed to her. Patricia, thank goodness you're here, Thornton said loudly. You remember what happened last Tuesday, don't you? Patricia looked confused. Last Tuesday? I wasn't here last Tuesday. I was in Chicago. No, Thornton said, her eyes boring into Patricia's. Remember the disruption, with certain people being loud and refusing to follow rules? Patricia's gaze shifted between Thornton, the officers, and Evelyn with her half-attached handcuff. Understanding seemed to dawn on her face, but not the kind Thornton wanted. Margaret, what are you doing? Patricia asked quietly. I'm trying to maintain order in our library, Thornton replied, her voice rising. Some people don't understand appropriate behavior in public spaces. By some people? You mean black people? Evelyn asked directly. I never said that, Thornton protested. You didn't have to, Patricia said suddenly, surprising everyone. Margaret, I've watched you do this before. That young black man last month who you said was casing the computer lab when he was just waiting for his session to start. The black teenage girls you had removed for being too loud when they were whispering quieter than the white kids in the next row. Patricia, Thornton gasped, betrayal clear in her voice. Cooper moved toward Patricia. Ma'am, you're interfering with police operations, he warned. By telling the truth? Patricia asked. Is honesty now interference? Evelyn pulled out her small notebook with her free hand, making a quick notation. Sullivan noticed immediately. What are you writing? He demanded. Documentation, Evelyn replied. Times, statements, witnesses, all perfectly legal. Give me that, Sullivan ordered, reaching for the notebook. No, Evelyn said simply, holding it against her chest. This is my personal property. You have no right to confiscate it without a warrant. More patrons were filtering into the reading room, drawn by the commotion. Each new arrival pulled out their phone, adding to the growing number of cameras documenting the scene. Cooper started approaching them one by one. No recording in the library, he announced, though no such policy was posted anywhere. Since when? A young man asked. I've recorded study sessions here dozens of times. It's a privacy issue, Cooper insisted. For the safety of our patrons. The only patron being threatened is her, the man pointed at Evelyn, and she doesn't seem to object to being recorded. Please, keep recording, Evelyn said clearly. Documentation is important. Thornton was growing desperate. She turned to the growing crowd. This woman has been asked to leave multiple times, she announced. She's trespassing. The police are just doing their job. I've been asked to leave without cause, Evelyn corrected. That's not the same as lawful trespass. For trespass to apply, I would need to be violating actual library policies or laws, not arbitrary decisions based on personal prejudice. She talks like a lawyer, someone whispered. Or someone who knows her rights, another person responded. An elderly black woman entered the reading room, leaning heavily on her cane. She took one look at the scene and shook her head. Not again, Margaret, she said sadly. Mrs. Robinson, this isn't what it looks like, Thornton began. It looks like exactly what it is, Mrs. Robinson replied. The same thing that's been happening in this library for the 3 years you've been head librarian. How many complaints have been filed against you now? 7, 8? Those complaints were dismissed, Thornton said defensively. Dismissed doesn't mean unfounded, Mrs. Robinson said. It means the board didn't want to deal with the problem. Sullivan had heard enough testimony. Everyone who isn't directly involved needs to clear out now, he ordered. We're in a public library, Harold said, still sitting with his newspapers. We have a right to be here. Not if I say you don't, Sullivan threatened. Officer, you can't arbitrarily clear a public space without an emergency, Evelyn said, still making notes despite the handcuff limiting her movement. There's no threat to public safety here except what you're creating. Cooper tried a different approach, moving through the crowd with his chest puffed out. For your own safety, folks should probably move along, he suggested, his tone implying vague threats. Safety from what? Patricia asked. From watching a woman get arrested for reading while black? The crowd wasn't dispersing. If anything, it was growing. Word had spread through the library, and people were coming to witness what was happening. The social dynamic Sullivan and Thornton had counted on, public embarrassment leading to compliance, was backfiring spectacularly. Martinez stepped forward, pulling out his notepad as if proper documentation might somehow salvage the deteriorating situation. Ma'am, I need to see multiple forms of identification, he said, trying to project authority despite his obvious discomfort. For what purpose? Evelyn asked, her calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the handcuff dangling from her wrist. I've already explained I'm not required to provide identification unless you have reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. We need to verify who you are, Martinez insisted, his pen hovering over the blank notepad page. Why? Evelyn pressed. What difference does my identity make to the alleged library policy violation? Martinez glanced at Sullivan, clearly hoping for backup on the procedural questions. Sullivan just grunted, still trying to maneuver the second handcuff onto Evelyn's left wrist, while she kept her arm pressed against her body. Standard procedure requires identification, Martinez said, falling back on vague protocol claims. Procedure for what? Evelyn asked. Traffic stops? Terry stops? Arrest processing? Each has different legal requirements. Which procedure specifically are you following? The younger officer's face flushed. He wasn't used to being questioned about procedures, especially not by someone who clearly understood them better than he did. Just show us your ID, he said, his voice carrying a note of pleading. I'll need something more than just because as a legal justification, Evelyn replied. She shifted her notebook to her restricted hand and continued writing with her left, adapting smoothly to the limitation. Cooper suddenly pointed at her messenger bag. She could have anything in there, he announced. Weapons, stolen property, drugs. Based on what evidence? Evelyn asked immediately. What specific, articulable facts lead you to suspect I have contraband? You're being evasive, Sullivan said, abandoning his attempt with the second handcuff temporarily. That's suspicious in itself. Asserting constitutional rights isn't evasive, Evelyn countered. It's exactly what every citizen should do when confronted with unlawful demands. We should search her bag, Cooper suggested eagerly, already reaching for it. Don't touch that, Evelyn said sharply, her first real show of emotion. You have no warrant and no probable cause for a search. We don't need a warrant if you're under arrest, Sullivan said triumphantly. But I'm not under arrest, Evelyn pointed out. You haven't articulated any crime, and the handcuff doesn't change that. An unlawful detention doesn't suddenly become lawful just because you've partially restrained someone. Martinez's radio crackled to life. Unit 23, what's your status at the library? A female voice asked. Dealing with an uncooperative subject, Martinez responded. Sergeant Hoffman might want to swing by. She's already en route, the dispatcher replied. ETA 3 minutes. Evelyn made another note in her book. Interesting that a sergeant was already dispatched before you called for one, she observed. "What are you implying?" Sullivan demanded. "I'm not implying anything," Evelyn said. "I'm documenting the timeline of events. The sergeant was already coming before Officer Martinez suggested calling for supervision. That suggests this response was pre-planned rather than reactive to actual circumstances." The reading room doors burst open, and Sergeant Rachel Hoffman strode in like she owned the building. Her uniform was crisp, her expression hard, and her eyes immediately locked onto Evelyn with obvious disdain. "What do we have here?" Hoffman asked, though her tone suggested she already knew exactly what narrative she'd been given. "Trespasser, refusing to leave, refusing to identify, possible assault on an officer," Sullivan rattled off quickly. "Assault?" Evelyn's voice carried genuine incredulity. "At what point did I assault anyone?" "You made threatening gestures," Sullivan claimed. "I reached for my research folders," Evelyn corrected, "while you watched, after announcing my intention, moving slowly and deliberately." Hoffman approached Evelyn, looking her up and down with calculated dismissal. "You're one of those sovereign citizen types, aren't you?" she said. "Think the laws don't apply to you?" "On the contrary," Evelyn replied. "I think the laws apply to everyone, including law enforcement. That's rather the point of having laws." "Smart mouth," Hoffman observed. "That's what got you into this situation." "Knowledge of civil rights is now considered a smart mouth?" Evelyn asked. "That's a concerning perspective for a law enforcement supervisor." Hoffman's eyes narrowed. "You some kind of activist? One of those cop watchers who goes around creating situations?" "I'm a researcher who came to the library to research," Evelyn said simply. "The situation was created by Ms. Thornton's call and your officer's response." "Show me your identification," Hoffman ordered. "Are you ordering me as part of a lawful detention?" Evelyn asked. "Because your officers still haven't articulated reasonable suspicion of any crime." "You're trespassing," Hoffman stated flatly. "The library is open to the public," Evelyn responded. "I haven't violated any posted rules. No one has asked me to leave for any legitimate reason. That's not trespassing under state law." Hoffman turned to Thornton. "You want her gone, right?" she asked. "Absolutely," Thornton confirmed quickly. "There you go," Hoffman said to Evelyn. "The person in charge of the facility wants you to leave. That makes it trespassing." "Actually, it doesn't," Evelyn said, her voice taking on a teaching quality despite her circumstances. "Public accommodation laws prevent arbitrary discrimination. A public library can't ban someone without legitimate cause related to actual policy violations or safety concerns. I don't like them isn't sufficient legal grounds." "Are you a lawyer?" Hoffman demanded directly. "Does it matter?" Evelyn deflected. "Would my knowledge of the law be more or less valid based on my profession?" "Answer the question," Hoffman ordered. "I'm under no obligation to discuss my profession," Evelyn said. "But I will note that any citizen can and should understand their basic rights." Martinez had been typing on his phone, apparently looking something up. "Sarge, she might have a point about the public accommodation thing," he said hesitantly. Hoffman shot him a look that could have melted steel. "Whose side are you on, Martinez?" she asked coldly. "The law's side," Martinez said quietly, though he immediately looked like he regretted it. "The law is what we say it is," Hoffman declared. "We're the ones who enforce it." "That's a fundamental misunderstanding of how law works," Evelyn said, continuing to take notes. "Law enforcement enforces existing law. You don't create it. The legislature creates laws, the judiciary interprets them, and the executive branch, including law enforcement, enforces them. Basic separation of powers." "Now she's giving civics lessons," Sullivan muttered. "Someone clearly needs to," Patricia called out from the crowd, earning a sharp look from Hoffman. Hoffman pulled out her radio, making a show of calling for additional units. "This is Sergeant Hoffman requesting a transport wagon at Riverside Library," she said loudly. "We have a combative subject requiring multiple charges." "I haven't been combative," Evelyn stated clearly for the benefit of all recording devices. "I've been sitting and standing as directed while asserting my legal rights." "You're about to be charged with theft," Hoffman announced suddenly, as if the idea had just occurred to her. "Theft of what?" Evelyn asked, genuinely curious about what they would fabricate. Thornton jumped on the opportunity. "She has library materials in her bag that haven't been checked out," she said quickly. "I saw her put something in there earlier." "You saw me put my personal notebook in my bag," Evelyn corrected. "The one I brought with me. The one with notes dating back 3 months." "Prove it," Sullivan challenged. "The burden of proof is on the accuser," Evelyn replied. "If you're claiming I stole library materials, you need evidence. What specific materials am I accused of taking?" Thornton hesitated, her eyes darting around the reference section. "Reference books from that shelf," she pointed vaguely. "Those can't leave the library." "Which books specifically?" Evelyn pressed. "What titles? What call numbers? Surely you know your own collection." "We'll determine that when we search your bag," Hoffman said. "Without a warrant?" Evelyn asked. "Based on an accusation with no specificity? That would violate the Fourth Amendment as well as State Criminal Procedure Code Section 15.3, which requires particular description of items sought in a search." Martinez pulled out his phone again, apparently looking up the statute she'd cited. His eyes widened slightly when he found it. "Furthermore," Evelyn continued, "false accusation of theft by a municipal employee could constitute a violation of State Penal Code Section 947, conspiracy to deprive civil rights under color of law. Miss Thornton, are you certain you want to make this formal accusation?" Thornton took a small step back, uncertainty crossing her face for the first time. "She's threatening now," Cooper announced. "That's terroristic threats." "Citing actual law is not a threat," Evelyn said patiently. "It's information, the same information available to anyone who reads the annotated statutes." "How do you know all these codes?" Hoffman demanded suspiciously. "They're public information," Evelyn replied. "Posted on the state legislature website, updated annually. The criminal procedure codes were revised just this past January, which is why I know Section 15.3 now includes digital materials in its particularity requirement." Hoffman's confidence wavered slightly. Most people didn't know about the January revision. Even some officers weren't fully up to date on the changes. "You're also looking at obstruction of governmental administration," Hoffman said, shifting tactics. "State Penal Code 100.05. Actually, it's 195.07 in our state," Evelyn corrected. 195.05 is the New York statute, and obstruction requires intentionally preventing a public servant from performing an official function through physical interference or intimidation. Verbal assertion of rights doesn't qualify. That was established in State v. Morrison, decided by our Supreme Court in 2019. Sullivan looked at Martinez, who was frantically searching on his phone, nodding as he confirmed each citation Evelyn provided. "She could be making all this up," Sullivan protested. "Then verify it," Evelyn suggested. "Officer Martinez seems to be finding everything I'm citing. I particularly recommend reading the Morrison decision. The court was quite clear about the distinction between asserting rights and obstruction." "We can also charge disorderly conduct," Hoffman tried, "creating a public disturbance. Under Section 240.20, disorderly conduct requires intent to cause public inconvenience, annoyance, or alarm," Evelyn recited, "or recklessly creating risk thereof through fighting, violent behavior, unreasonable noise, or obstructing traffic. Which of those elements applies to sitting in a library reading? You're creating a disturbance right now, Hoffman insisted. I'm responding to your accusations, Evelyn countered. The disturbance was created when officers arrived for a non-crime. Multiple witnesses can attest that I was silent until approached by law enforcement. The crowd murmured agreement. Several people called out support, confirming they'd been watching the whole time. There's also criminal trespass, Sullivan said, grasping for something that would stick. Criminal trespass, third degree, section 140.10. Requires knowingly entering or remaining unlawfully, Evelyn said. The library is open to the public. I entered lawfully during business hours. For my presence to become unlawful, there would need to be either a lawful order to leave based on violation of established rules, or proper notice of trespass served according to Section 140 Subdivision 5. We're giving you notice now, Hoffman stated. Retroactive trespass notices don't create prior criminal liability, Evelyn explained. Even if you issued a valid trespass warning now, which requires specific procedures you haven't followed, it would only apply to future entries, not current presence. Martinez lowered his phone. Sarge, she's right about the trespass statute, he said quietly. I'm looking at it right now. Whose side are you on? Hoffman snapped at him again. I'm trying to make sure we don't violate her civil rights, Martinez replied, his voice gaining slight confidence. This is all being recorded. If we charge her with crimes that don't apply, we could face liability. Let me worry about liability, Hoffman said dismissively. Actually, qualified immunity has limits, Evelyn interjected. Knowingly violating clearly established constitutional rights removes immunity protection. That's from Pearson v. Callahan, a federal case from 2009. Each of you could be personally liable for damages if you proceed with arrests you know lack probable cause. The mention of personal liability caused all three officers to exchange uncomfortable glances. Lawsuits against the department were one thing, but personal liability meant their own assets could be at risk. We also need to consider Section 1983 claims, Evelyn added. That's the federal statute allowing civil suits for deprivation of rights under color of law. The damages can be substantial. The city of Riverside settled a similar case last year for $200,000. That was the Williams case, if you want to look it up. How do you know about that case? Hoffman asked sharply. That settlement was supposed to be confidential. The settlement amount was confidential, Evelyn agreed. The case itself is public record. Federal Court Docket 2-23 to CV 847. The complaint detailed allegations remarkably similar to what's happening here. Sullivan's patience finally snapped. Without warning, he grabbed Evelyn's left arm with excessive force, trying to wrench it behind her back to complete the handcuffing. The sudden violence drew gasps from the crowd. "Officer, you're using unnecessary force," Evelyn stated clearly, keeping her voice level despite the pain shooting through her shoulder. "I'm not resisting." "Stop resisting!" Sullivan shouted, though everyone could see Evelyn was standing perfectly still, neither pulling away nor fighting back. "I'm documenting this," Harold called out, his phone held high. "She's not resisting at all." Sullivan twisted harder, trying to force compliance through pain. Evelyn shifted her weight slightly, a subtle adjustment that reduced the pressure on her joint without appearing to fight back. It was a defensive movement, protective rather than aggressive. "You just assaulted me," Sullivan declared loudly. "Everyone saw that." "She didn't move," Patricia protested. "We all saw she didn't do anything." "She shifted her weight aggressively," Cooper chimed in, moving closer as if to help Sullivan. Martinez stepped back, his hand on his radio, but not calling for backup. His face showed clear discomfort with what was happening. "Brett, maybe ease up," he suggested quietly. "Control your suspect," Hoffman ordered Martinez. "If you can't handle this, I'll find someone who can." Sullivan yanked again, this time pulling Evelyn off balance. She stumbled but didn't fall, her free hand reaching out instinctively to steady herself against the table. Sullivan immediately interpreted this as resistance. "She's going for a weapon," he announced, though her hand was clearly empty and simply bracing against the wooden surface. Evelyn forced herself to remain calm, speaking clearly for the cameras. "I'm steadying myself after being pulled off balance," she narrated. "My hand is open and empty. I'm not reaching for anything." Cooper decided to involve himself more directly, moving to Evelyn's other side. "I've got her," he said to Sullivan, reaching for her right arm where the handcuff dangled. "Security guards don't have arrest authority," Evelyn said quickly. "Mr. Cooper, if you touch me, that's assault, not lawful detention." Cooper hesitated, looking to Hoffman for guidance. "He's assisting officers," Hoffman said. "That's perfectly legal." "Only if the officers are engaged in lawful activity," Evelyn countered, her voice strained from the awkward position Sullivan had forced her into. "Assisting in an unlawful arrest makes him liable for battery charges." Cooper's hand wavered, uncertainty crossing his face. The possibility of personal criminal charges clearly hadn't occurred to him. Sullivan, frustrated by the legal discussion, attempted to sweep Evelyn's legs to force her to the ground. She saw it coming and shifted her stance just enough to maintain balance. Another purely defensive movement that prevented injury without constituting resistance. "She's fighting," Sullivan grunted, though his own exertion was evident while Evelyn remained relatively composed. "I'm preventing injury to myself," Evelyn clarified. "Defensive positioning is not resistance. I have a right to protect myself from excessive force even during an arrest. That's established case law." The crowd was growing agitated. Someone shouted, "Police brutality!" Others called for the officers to stop. The tension in the room ratcheted higher with each passing second. Hoffman seemed to realize the situation was deteriorating. "Everyone needs to back up now," she ordered the crowd. "This is becoming a safety issue." "The only safety issue is what you're creating," Mrs. Robinson said firmly, her cane tapping against the floor as she moved closer despite her age. "This young woman was sitting here reading, and now you're attacking her." "Ma'am, please step back," Martinez said, moving to intercept the elderly woman. "Don't you touch me, young man," Mrs. Robinson warned. "I've been coming to this library for 40 years. I have every right to witness what's happening here." Sullivan made another attempt to force Evelyn's arm behind her back, this time using his knee to try to buckle her legs. Evelyn turned slightly, redirecting the force rather than absorbing it, causing Sullivan to stumble past her. He had to catch himself on the table to avoid falling. "She just attacked me," Sullivan announced immediately, though the videos would clearly show he had simply lost balance from his own aggressive movement. "Officer Sullivan attempted to knee me," Evelyn said for the record. "I turned to avoid injury. He lost balance due to his own momentum." Hoffman had seen enough. She moved in herself, attempting to grab Evelyn's notebook. Evelyn pulled it against her chest protectively, a motion that Hoffman immediately characterized as aggressive. "She swung at me," Hoffman declared. "I pulled my notebook to my chest," Evelyn corrected. "A defensive motion to protect my property. The videos will show the trajectory was toward my body, not toward you." The situation was spiraling. Cooper made another attempt to grab Evelyn's arm, but she stepped back, maintaining distance. Sullivan lunged forward again, and this time Evelyn had nowhere to go. Her back hit the bookshelf, trapped between the furniture and the approaching officers. "Please stop," Evelyn said, for the first time showing a hint of fear. "You're causing unnecessary harm. I'm not a threat to anyone." "You're under arrest," Sullivan said, breathing heavily from his exertions. "For what specific crime?" Evelyn asked again. "You still haven't articulated probable cause for any actual offense." Sullivan didn't answer. Instead, he grabbed her wrist, where the handcuff dangled and twisted, using pain compliance techniques. Evelyn's face tightened, but she didn't cry out, maintaining her composure even as tears formed in her eyes from the pain. "That's a nerve pressure point technique," she managed to say through gritted teeth. "It's only authorized when a subject is actively resisting." "I'm not resisting." Several people in the crowd were now openly crying, upset by what they were witnessing. Others were shouting for the officers to stop. The situation was on the verge of becoming a full-scale confrontation between the crowd and the police. "If you all don't calm down, everyone's getting arrested," Hoffman threatened the crowd. "For what?" someone shouted back. "For witnessing police brutality?" Martinez's radio crackled. "Additional units are 5 minutes out," the dispatcher announced. "We don't need them," Hoffman said into her own radio. "Situation is under control." But it wasn't under control. Sullivan was still struggling to fully restrain Evelyn, who continued to use minimal defensive movements to prevent injury while carefully avoiding anything that could be construed as assault. Cooper was hovering uncertainly, afraid to help, but afraid to back away. Martinez looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, and the crowd was growing larger and angrier by the minute. The struggle had reached a stalemate when a new voice cut through the chaos. "Excuse me, is there a problem here?" A well-dressed Asian man in his 50s stood at the reading room entrance, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes taking in every detail. "Sir, this is a police matter," Hoffman said dismissively. "Please move along." "I'm Thomas Chen," the man said mildly, though something in his tone suggested this meant something. "I often use this library for research. I couldn't help but notice the disturbance." Sullivan's grip on Evelyn's arm loosened slightly as he glanced at the newcomer. Chen's name clearly registered with someone, though Evelyn couldn't tell who. "Mr. Chen," Thornton said quickly, her voice taking on an ingratiating tone. "This person has been causing problems. We're just handling it." Chen pulled out his phone, not to record, but to check something. "Interesting," he said after a moment. According to the library's public Facebook page, there was a post 40 minutes ago about how quiet and peaceful the afternoon was. "That was your post, wasn't it, Ms. Thornton?" Thornton's face flushed. "That was before she became disruptive," she said. 40 minutes ago would be 2:50 p.m., Chen noted, but Officer Sullivan's badge camera would show he arrived at approximately 3:30, correct? Sullivan's hand moved instinctively to his chest where the small camera was mounted. A red light should have been blinking, indicating it was recording. But the light was dark. "My body cam is malfunctioning," Sullivan said quickly. "Battery died." "How convenient," someone in the crowd muttered. "What about yours, Officer Martinez?" Chen asked pleasantly. Martinez looked down at his own chest camera. The red light was blinking. "Mine's working," he admitted reluctantly. "Good," Chen said. "Then we'll have a complete record of events from at least one angle." Hoffman stepped forward. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to step back. You're interfering with police operations." "I'm standing at a respectful distance and asking questions," Chen replied calmly. "I believe that's still legal, Sergeant Hoffman." The fact that he knew her name without seeing her name tag caused Hoffman to pause. Chen wasn't just a random patron. Evelyn, still partially restrained, spoke up. "The library security cameras would have recorded everything from the beginning," she said. "There's one in each corner of this room." Everyone looked up simultaneously. Sure enough, black dome cameras were mounted in 3 corners. But the 4th corner, the one with the best angle of Evelyn's table, had a camera that was askew, pointing at the ceiling instead of the room. "That camera's been broken for weeks," Cooper said quickly. Too quickly. "Weeks?" Harold spoke up from his seat. "It was working yesterday. I know because I waved at it when I came in, like I always do. My grandkids think it's funny." Chen was typing on his phone. "I'm sending a preservation request to the library's IT department right now," he said, "just to ensure no footage is accidentally deleted or lost." "You can't do that," Thornton protested. "That requires authorization." "Public records are subject to preservation requests from any citizen," Chen said mildly. "State Open Records Act, Section 12. I'm sure you're familiar with it." Martinez's radio crackled to life. "Unit 23, be advised. We're getting multiple calls about your situation. Media has been notified." Hoffman cursed under her breath. "We need to wrap this up," she told Sullivan. "I'm trying," Sullivan grunted, still attempting to fully restrain Evelyn with limited success. Patricia had been busy on her phone. "I found something interesting," she announced loudly. "There have been 14 formal complaints filed against head librarian Thornton in the past 3 years. "Those are confidential," Thornton snapped. "No, they're not," Patricia replied. "They're public record once they're officially filed with the city. They're all here on the city clerk's website. 12 of the 14 complaints involve racial profiling." The crowd murmured with interest. Several people started looking up the records on their own phones. "This one from last year is particularly interesting," Patricia continued. "A black professor was removed from the library for suspicious research behavior. He was studying the history of redlining in Riverside. The city settled out of court." "That has nothing to do with this situation," Hoffman said, but her voice lacked conviction. Chen had moved slightly closer, though still maintaining a respectful distance. "Has anyone checked the sign-in system?" he asked. "The digital records would show how long Ms." He paused, looking at Evelyn questioningly. "Washington," Evelyn supplied, deciding her surname was harmless information. "How long Ms. Washington has been here," Chen continued, "and whether there were any actual complaints logged before the police were called." "The system is down for maintenance," Thornton said immediately. "The same system I used to sign in 20 minutes ago?" Chen asked. "It seemed to be working fine then." Cooper shifted uncomfortably. "It just went down," he said. "In the last 20 minutes?" Chen pressed. "How unfortunate, though I assume the backup server would still have the data." Martinez had been quiet, but now he spoke up. "Sarge, maybe we should review all the documentation before proceeding," he suggested. "Make sure everything is properly recorded." "Everything is recorded," Hoffman said sharply. "Except Officer Sullivan's body cam footage," Evelyn pointed out, "and potentially the security camera footage from that corner. And the sign-in records. That's a lot of technical failures for one incident." Chen's phone buzzed with an incoming email. He read it quickly, his eyebrows rising slightly. "Interesting development," he said. "The library's IT department just responded to my preservation request. They confirmed that all digital systems are fully operational and have been all day." Thornton's face went pale. "That's not possible," she stammered. "Cooper just said the sign-in system was down." "Perhaps Mr. Cooper was mistaken," Chen suggested diplomatically, though his tone made it clear he knew Cooper had lied. A young woman in the crowd raised her hand like she was in class. "I work in IT," she said. "I can verify if the systems are working. Just need someone to try logging in right now." "No one needs to do that," Hoffman said quickly. This isn't a technology investigation. But it speaks to credibility, Evelyn said, still held awkwardly by Sullivan. If staff members are lying about technical failures, what else are they lying about? Martinez had been scrolling through his phone, reviewing something intently. "Sarge," he said slowly, "I'm looking at the dispatch log. The call from the library came in at 3:22 p.m., but it wasn't coded as a trespass or disturbance." "So what?" Hoffman snapped. "It was coded as a community policing request," Martinez continued. "Those are supposed to be non-criminal social service calls. We shouldn't even be making arrests on a community policing request." Sullivan's grip on Evelyn tightened. "She became criminal after we arrived," he insisted. "How?" Martinez asked, seeming to find courage in the facts. "By knowing her rights? By asking her questions? The body cam footage will show she never became violent or threatening." "Martinez, you're walking a thin line," Hoffman warned. Chen had been taking photos of various posted signs around the reading room. "There's no posted policy about time limits for patron use," he observed. "No signs about consolidating materials, no restrictions on research activities. In fact, this sign here specifically says, 'Extended research sessions welcome.'" The crowd was growing more organized. Several people had formed a rough line, ensuring they captured every angle with their phones. Others were taking notes, documenting times and statements. Mrs. Robinson tapped her cane on the floor to get attention. "I've been keeping a journal about this library for 3 years, she announced. "Every incident I witnessed. Would people like to know how many involved Ms. Thornton, calling security or police?" "That's not relevant," Thornton protested. 23 times, Mrs. Robinson continued anyway. 21 of those calls involved patrons of color. "I have dates, times, and descriptions." "Those were all legitimate security concerns," Cooper insisted, "including the grandmother who was reading picture books to her grandchildren too loudly," Mrs. Robinson asked, "or the college student who was accused of stealing because he was using his own laptop." Patricia had found something else on her phone. "The city's police oversight board has a public database," she said. "Officer Sullivan has 7 previous complaints for excessive force, all involving black citizens." "Those complaints were investigated and dismissed," Hoffman said. "Dismissed doesn't mean unfounded," Evelyn noted, echoing Mrs. Robinson's earlier observation. "It often means the investigation wasn't thorough, or the board chose not to act." Chen received another notification on his phone. "The library's general counsel just responded to my request," he said. "They're ordering all video footage preserved immediately and requesting a full incident report from all involved parties." "The library has a general counsel?" Cooper asked, looking worried for the first time. "Every city department does," Chen replied. "They'll be very interested in potential liability issues arising from this incident." A new voice joined the discussion as a young black woman entered the reading room. "I'm Maya Rodriguez from the Riverside Gazette," she announced, holding up her press credentials. "We received multiple calls about an incident here. Can someone explain what's happening?" "No comment," Hoffman said immediately. "I can comment," Patricia said. "We're witnessing what appears to be an unlawful arrest of a library patron who was doing nothing but reading." Maya pulled out her recorder. "Can anyone confirm whether proper procedures were followed?" she asked. "The body cam footage will show everything," Martinez said, then seemed surprised he'd spoken. "Officer Martinez, is your body cam currently recording?" Maya asked directly. Martinez glanced at Hoffman, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am, it is," he confirmed. "And when did it begin recording?" Maya pressed. "When we arrived on scene," Martinez admitted. "Standard procedure." "So there should be a complete record from at least one officer's perspective," Maya said, making notes. That footage would be subject to FOIA request, correct? After an investigation is complete, Hoffman said. Actually, in cases of public interest involving potential civil rights violations, expedited FOIA processing can be requested, Maya corrected. I'll be filing that request immediately. Chen had been quiet for a moment, studying something on his phone. Ms. Washington, he said carefully, have you been documenting the times of each escalation? Yes, Evelyn replied. I have detailed notes of every interaction, every statement, and every use of force. Good, Chen said. Documentation will be crucial for the inevitable investigation. What investigation? Sullivan demanded, still struggling to maintain his grip on Evelyn. The one that always follows when multiple witnesses record potential police misconduct, Chen replied mildly. Especially when media is involved. Maya was interviewing witnesses now, her recorder capturing their accounts. Each person told the same story of a woman quietly reading, being harassed by library staff, then confronted by increasingly aggressive police officers. This is starting to look like a pattern, Maya said loud enough for everyone to hear. Similar to the Washington Heights Library incident last month, and the Riverside Community Center situation before that. Within minutes, the library was flooding with higher-ranking officials. A captain arrived first, followed by a deputy chief, then someone from the mayor's office. Each new arrival looked more panicked than the last, as they absorbed the scope of the disaster unfolding before them. Evelyn had calmly returned to her table, organizing her research materials as if the last hour hadn't happened. But everyone could see her hands photographing every document, creating a digital trail of evidence. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Jennifer? Yes, it's me. I need you to bring the full file on police misconduct complaints. The thick folder from my desk. Yes, all of it. Riverside Library. Immediately. Chen had positioned himself strategically, ensuring he could witness everything that followed. Maya Rodriguez was conducting rapid-fire interviews with witnesses, getting their accounts while memories were fresh, and before anyone could pressure them to change their stories. Patricia had taken it upon herself to document the scene, photographing everything from the scuff marks on the floor, where Sullivan had struggled with Evelyn, to the askew security camera that mysteriously wasn't working. The deputy chief, a tall woman named Foster, approached Evelyn carefully, as if approaching a live explosive. Senator Washington, I'm Deputy Chief Foster. I want to apologize for what happened here today. I don't want apologies, Evelyn said, without looking up from her papers. I want accountability. I want to know how many other people have been treated this way without recourse. We'll conduct a full investigation, Foster assured her, though her voice lacked conviction. Internal investigation? Evelyn asked, finally meeting Foster's eyes. The same kind that dismissed 7 complaints against Officer Sullivan? The same kind that found no wrongdoing in 21 racially motivated calls from this library? Foster's jaw tightened. How do you know about those complaints? She asked. Public records, Evelyn replied simply. The same records that show a pattern of discrimination that your department has systematically ignored. Tell me, Deputy Chief, how many of those complaints came from people who couldn't afford lawyers? How many were intimidated into dropping their cases? Before Foster could respond, a young woman burst through the library doors carrying 2 banker's boxes. Senator, I have the files you requested, Jennifer announced, slightly out of breath from hurrying. Thank you, Jennifer, Evelyn said. Please distribute copies of the summary report to Deputy Chief Foster, the journalist from the Gazette, and Mr. Chen. Jennifer efficiently handed out thick packets to each person named. Foster opened hers and immediately paled. This is, she started, unable to finish the sentence. 18 months of documented police misconduct in Riverside, Evelyn finished for her. Cross-referenced with demographic data, complaint outcomes, and officer disciplinary records, or lack thereof, in most cases. Maya was speed-reading through her copy, her eyes widening with each page. "These statistics are damning," she said. 87% of excessive force complaints involve officers with 3 or more previous complaints. No disciplinary action in 92% of cases. Officer Sullivan appears on page 43, Evelyn noted helpfully. "You'll see he's been involved in similar incidents 14 times. Each time the complainant was Black or Hispanic. Each time the complaint was dismissed." "This is going to be a series of articles," Maya muttered, still reading. "This is Pulitzer-level documentation of systematic discrimination." Jennifer had been setting up a laptop on the table. "Senator, I have the video compilation you requested last month ready to play," she said. "What video compilation?" Foster asked nervously. "Body camera footage from 12 different incidents," Evelyn explained. "All obtained through FOIA requests, all showing Officer Sullivan and Sergeant Hoffman engaging in similar behavior to what we witnessed today." "You can't show that publicly," Hoffman protested, finally finding her voice. "That's evidence in ongoing investigations." "Actually, these cases were all closed," Evelyn corrected. "No wrongdoing found, remember? That makes them public record." The laptop screen came to life, showing split-screen footage from multiple body cameras. In each one, Sullivan could be seen escalating minor situations into arrests. The audio was particularly damning, filled with the same dismissive tone, the same aggressive tactics, the same disregard for rights he'd displayed today. "Turn it off," Sullivan pleaded, his voice breaking. "Please, just turn it off." "These are your actions, Officer Sullivan," Evelyn said. "If you're ashamed to see them, perhaps you should be ashamed to commit them." The mayor's representative, a nervous young man named Peterson, finally spoke up. "Senator Washington, what can the city do to address your concerns?" "My concerns?" Evelyn stood, her full senatorial presence filling the room. "These aren't my concerns. These are the concerns of every citizen who's been profiled, harassed, and abused by a system that's supposed to protect them." She pulled out another folder, this one marked with the state seal. "I've drafted emergency legislation that will be introduced Monday morning. It includes mandatory body camera activation for all police interactions, citizen oversight boards with actual power, and personal liability for officers who violate civil rights." "Personal liability?" Foster gasped. "That would end qualified immunity." "For egregious violations, yes," Evelyn confirmed. "Officers who knowingly violate rights, who turn off body cameras, who file false reports. They should face personal consequences, not hide behind their badges." The room had filled with even more officials now, including the mayor himself, looking haggard and panicked. "Senator Washington," he began, his political smile plastered unconvincingly across his face. "Mayor Richards," Evelyn acknowledged coolly. "How interesting that you found time in your schedule to visit the library today." "I heard about this unfortunate misunderstanding," the mayor said carefully. "Misunderstanding?" Evelyn's voice could have frozen water. "Is that what we're calling assault and false imprisonment now?" The tension in the reading room had reached its breaking point. Sullivan's arms were trembling from the extended struggle to restrain Evelyn, sweat beading on his forehead. The crowd had grown to nearly 40 people, all recording, all watching, waiting for something to give. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the library floor, creating an almost theatrical lighting for what was about to unfold. "This has gone on long enough," Hoffman declared, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never been challenged in her position. "Sullivan, Martinez, we're taking her in. Now." "Wait!" Thomas Chen said suddenly, his voice carrying an authority that made everyone pause. There was something in his tone, a quiet confidence that suggested he knew more than he'd been letting on. "Ms. Washington, before this proceeds any further, perhaps you should provide the identification they've been requesting." Evelyn met Chen's eyes, seeing something there, an understanding, a recognition. He knew something, or suspected it. She could see it in the way he held himself, the careful way he'd been documenting everything. She nodded slowly. "Mr. Chen is right," she said calmly. "I've made my point about constitutional rights. Now it's time for full transparency." "Finally," Sullivan muttered, loosening his grip slightly in anticipation of her compliance. "About time you started cooperating." "I've been cooperating," Evelyn corrected him. "I've been cooperating with lawful requests. What I haven't been doing is submitting to unlawful demands. There's a significant difference, one that law enforcement should understand." "Just show us your ID," Hoffman said impatiently. "We've wasted enough time here." "Wasted time?" Evelyn repeated thoughtfully. "Interesting choice of words. Is investigating supposed library violations a waste of time? Or is it only a waste when the subject knows their rights?" "Ma'am, please," Martinez said, clearly wanting this to end. "Can you just show us identification so we can resolve this?" Evelyn looked around the room slowly, taking in every face, every camera, every witness to what was about to happen. "I want to be very clear about something first," she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "What you're about to learn doesn't change anything about what happened here today. It doesn't make the profiling acceptable. It doesn't make the excessive force justified. It doesn't make the lies and false accusations legitimate." "What are you talking about?" Sullivan demanded, his patience completely exhausted. "I'm going to reach into my jacket pocket," Evelyn announced clearly, ensuring every camera could capture her words. "Inner left pocket, moving slowly so there's no misunderstanding of my intentions." Hoffman nodded, her hand hovering near her weapon just in case. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic outside. Someone's phone buzzed, but they quickly silenced it. This moment felt important, pivotal, like standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to see what was at the bottom. With her free hand, Evelyn reached into her jacket pocket. The movement deliberate and unhurried. Her fingers found the familiar leather of her official wallet, the one she'd carried for 4 years now. She withdrew it slowly, letting the light catch the state seal embossed on the leather before opening it. The gold seal of the state senate caught the light first, gleaming like a beacon. Then the words became visible as she held it higher for everyone to see, ensuring the cameras could capture every detail. Senator Evelyn Washington, District 15, Chair of the Criminal Justice Reform Committee. The silence that followed was absolute, as if someone had pressed pause on reality itself. It stretched for 1 heartbeat, then 2, then 3. Someone dropped their phone, and the clatter seemed impossibly loud in the quiet. Sullivan's hands fell away from Evelyn's arms as if they'd turned to fire. He stumbled backward, his face draining of all color until he looked almost gray. His mouth opened and closed without sound, like a fish gasping for air. The handcuff still dangling from her right wrist clinked softly as she lowered her arm, the sound somehow both delicate and damning. "No," Thornton whispered, the word barely audible. She stumbled backward until she hit the circulation desk, her hands groping blindly for support. "That's not possible. You can't be." But I am, Evelyn said simply. I'm Senator Evelyn Washington. I represent District 15, which includes this library. I chair the committee that oversees police funding and criminal justice legislation for this state. I was here today researching education funding disparities for a bill I'm sponsoring next session. Martinez's notepad slipped from his fingers, hitting the floor with a slap that seemed to break the spell. His face had gone pale, and he was shaking his head slowly as if trying to deny what his eyes were seeing. "Oh my God," he breathed. "Senator Washington, I'm so sorry. I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't ask properly," Evelyn said firmly, her senatorial voice now fully present, the same voice that had commanded attention in legislative chambers and committee hearings. "You assumed. You presumed. You escalated based on bias rather than facts." "This is impossible," Hoffman said, though her voice cracked on the last word. "How could we not know? Why didn't you say something?" "I shouldn't have to announce my title to be treated with basic human dignity," Evelyn replied. "Every citizen who walks through those doors deserves the same respect you would have shown if you'd known I was a senator from the moment you arrived." Sullivan had backed away until he hit the wall, his legs seemingly unable to support him properly. His face had gone from pale to flushed and back to pale again. "Senator, we didn't mean," he stammered, the words tumbling over each other. "Didn't mean what?" Evelyn asked, rubbing her wrist where the handcuff had been too tight, the skin already showing signs of bruising. "Didn't mean to profile me? Didn't mean to use excessive force? Didn't mean to violate multiple civil rights? Or did you just not mean to do it to someone with power?" The crowd erupted. Some people applauded, others shouted questions, phones flashed as everyone tried to capture this moment. People were talking over each other, their voices creating a cacophony of shock and vindication. "She's really a senator," someone said in amazement. "They arrested a state senator," another voice added. "This is going to be everywhere," a third person predicted. Maya Rodriguez was already on her phone, typing rapidly with the efficiency of a seasoned journalist. "I'm confirming this," she announced to no one in particular. "Senator Evelyn Washington, District 15, she read from the state website. Elected 4 years ago, former civil rights attorney, graduated Yale Law School, currently serves as chair of the Criminal Justice Reform Committee, member of the Education Committee, and vice chair of the Appropriations Subcommittee for Public Safety." She held up her phone, showing the official photo that matched the woman standing before them perfectly. "The woman whose committee controls your budget," Chen added helpfully, his voice carrying just a hint of satisfaction. "The woman who will be voting on police reform bills next month. The woman who just experienced firsthand the systemic problems she's been trying to address legislatively." Hoffman's face had turned an alarming shade of red, then purple, then back to red. She seemed to be having difficulty breathing properly. "This is some kind of trick," she said, though her voice was weak, desperate. "That ID could be fake. This could all be some elaborate setup." "A setup?" Evelyn asked incredulously. "You think I arranged to be profiled, harassed, and assaulted as some kind of elaborate sting operation? That I invited you to violate my civil rights?" "You should have identified yourself immediately," Hoffman tried to argue, grasping for any justification. "The law doesn't require that," Evelyn responded. "In fact, the law protects citizens from having to identify themselves without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. That's exactly what I've been trying to explain for the past hour." Patricia stepped forward from the crowd. "I've been recording everything," she announced. "Every word, every action." The senator never once resisted. She only asserted her rights. "Rights that every citizen has," Evelyn added. Rights that shouldn't depend on whether someone recognizes you or respects your position. Cooper had reappeared at the edge of the crowd, trying to blend in, but his security uniform made him conspicuous. When he saw everyone looking at him, he tried to slip away again. "Mr. Cooper," Evelyn called out, "please stay. You're a witness to everything that transpired here." "I was just following procedure," Cooper said weakly. "What procedure?" Evelyn asked. "The one where you walked past my table 6 times in 30 minutes? The one where you lied about the sign-in system being down? Or the one where you claimed I'd been problematic for weeks, when I hadn't been here in over a month?" The mayor cleared his throat nervously. "Senator Washington, perhaps we could discuss this in my office, privately," he suggested, clearly hoping to contain the situation. "No," Evelyn said firmly. "This happened publicly. It will be addressed publicly. In fact, I'm calling for an emergency city council hearing. Tonight." "Tonight?" the mayor sputtered. "That's impossible. We need proper notice. Preparation time. The city charter allows for emergency sessions when civil rights violations are alleged," Evelyn stated. "Section 12, Article 4. I'm sure your legal counsel can confirm that, Mayor Richards." Peterson was already on his phone, presumably with the city attorney. His face grew increasingly pale as he listened to the response. "The senator is correct," he whispered to the mayor. "We're legally required to convene if she formally requests it." "Then I'm formally requesting it," Evelyn announced. 7 o'clock tonight. Public testimony will be heard." The crowd in the library erupted in approval. Many people were already texting and calling others, spreading the word about the emergency hearing. Maya Rodriguez was typing furiously on her phone, undoubtedly alerting her editor to save space for a major story. "This is an ambush," Hoffman muttered, but loud enough for others to hear. "An ambush?" Evelyn turned to face her directly. "Like when 3 officers surrounded me for reading? Like when you fabricated charges? That kind of ambush?" Mrs. Robinson stepped forward, her cane tapping authoritatively. "I'll be testifying tonight," she announced. "I have 3 years of documentation about this library's discriminatory practices." "So will I," Patricia added. "I've witnessed enough to fill an hour of testimony." "And I," Harold said, standing up from his table where he'd remained throughout the incident, "I'm tired of staying silent while I watch injustice happen." Chen pulled out his phone. "I'm contacting the Asian American Business Association," he said. "Many of our members have similar experiences to share." "The Black Ministers Alliance will be there," someone called out from the crowd. "The Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, too," another voice added. Foster looked desperately at the mayor. "Sir, this is spiraling out of control," she whispered urgently. "It's been out of control for years," Evelyn corrected her. "We're just finally shining a light on it." Jennifer had been busy on her laptop. "Senator, I've compiled the statistics you requested," she said. "In the past 5 years, this police department has paid out over $3 million in settlements for civil rights violations." "3 million," the mayor gasped. $3.2 million, to be exact, Jennifer clarified. "That's taxpayer money used to cover up police misconduct, instead of funding schools, roads, or community programs." Sullivan had sunk into a chair, his head in his hands. Martinez stood awkwardly nearby, clearly unsure whether he should comfort his partner or distance himself from him. "Officer Martinez," Evelyn called out, "you tried to de-escalate several times. You checked the actual statutes. Why didn't you do more to stop this?" Martinez looked miserable. I'm just a junior officer, Senator," he said quietly. "I didn't think anyone would listen to me over a sergeant and senior officer." That's the culture problem we're addressing, Evelyn said. When good officers feel powerless to stop bad ones, the entire system is broken. The library had become a hub of activity. Community organizers were making plans for the evening hearing. Witnesses were exchanging contact information. Media outlets were setting up for live broadcasts. "Senator, we need to prepare your testimony," Jennifer reminded her. "My testimony is already prepared," Evelyn replied. "I've been preparing it for 4 years, every time I've heard from constituents who've experienced what I experienced today." Thornton had been trying to slip away unnoticed, but Chen blocked her path. "Ms. Thornton, as a city employee, you're required to attend the hearing, aren't you?" he asked, pointedly. I suppose," Thornton stammered. "Good," Evelyn said. "I have questions about your hiring practices, your complaint procedures, and your relationship with certain officers who seem to respond remarkably quickly to your calls." "This is a witch hunt," Cooper protested weakly. "No," Evelyn corrected him. "A witch hunt targets innocence. This is accountability for documented misconduct. There's a significant difference." The mayor's phone rang. He answered it, his face growing even more concerned as he listened. "The governor wants to know what's happening," he announced after hanging up. "Tell the governor I'll be calling him after the hearing," Evelyn said. "We'll need to discuss state-level interventions if the city can't handle its own problems." "State interventions?" Foster asked, alarmed. "The state has the authority to take over local police departments that demonstrate patterns of civil rights violations," Evelyn explained. "It's rarely used, but this situation might warrant it." The implications hung heavy in the air. Everyone understood that this was no longer just about one incident in a library. This was about the entire structure of law enforcement in Riverside, possibly the state. By 6:45 that evening, the city council chambers were packed beyond capacity. People lined the walls and spilled into the hallway. News vans surrounded the building, their satellites reaching toward the darkening sky. The emergency hearing had become the epicenter of a long-overdue reckoning. Evelyn entered through a side door, now dressed in her formal senatorial attire, the transformation from library patron to state official complete. Jennifer walked beside her, carrying boxes of evidence. Behind them, a stream of witnesses prepared to testify. The city council members sat at their elevated bench, looking uncomfortable under the harsh lights and intense public scrutiny. Mayor Richards gavelled the session to order, though his hand shook slightly. "This emergency hearing has been called to address allegations of civil rights violations," the mayor began, reading from a prepared statement. "We will hear testimony from all parties involved." "I'll go first," Evelyn said, standing at the podium. The room fell silent. She began not with her own story, but with data. In the past 5 years, the Riverside Police Department has arrested 347 people at or near Riverside Public Library. 92% were people of color. 78% of those arrests resulted in dropped charges or dismissals. This isn't law enforcement. It's harassment with a badge. She pulled up a presentation on the screen behind her. Charts and graphs illustrated the pattern of discrimination in stark detail. Officer Brett Sullivan alone has been involved in 43 arrests at the library. Sergeant Rachel Hoffman has supervised 62. Not a single one resulted in a successful prosecution for any serious crime. Sullivan tried to object from his seat in the audience. "Those were all legitimate police actions," he called out. "Then why were the charges dropped?" Evelyn asked directly. "Why did the city pay settlements in 12 of those cases?" Sullivan had no answer. Evelyn continued, now showing body camera footage. "This is from 6 months ago," she narrated as the video played. "Officer Sullivan arresting a college student for suspicious studying. The student was reviewing for his medical school entrance exam. He's now at Johns Hopkins." More videos followed, each showing similar patterns of harassment and false arrests. The crowd's anger was palpable, punctuated by gasps and muttered curses as each new piece of evidence appeared. "But today's incident," Evelyn said, "today shows how deep this rot goes." She played audio from her own phone, which had been recording in her pocket during the encounter. Every threat, every lie, every escalation was captured in crystal-clear sound. When Thornton's voice claimed Evelyn had been problematic for weeks, Evelyn produced library login records showing this was her first visit in over a month. When Cooper claimed the security system was down, she showed IT department emails confirming all systems were operational. When Sullivan claimed she had been aggressive, she played witness videos showing her complete compliance until physically grabbed. "This is what happens when accountability disappears," Evelyn stated. "When officers know they won't face consequences, when supervisors encourage misconduct, when city officials look the other way and to avoid controversy." The city attorney, a thin man named Harrison, tried to interject. "Senator, these are serious allegations that should be handled through proper channels." "The proper channels have failed," Evelyn cut him off. "Internal Affairs dismissed 7 complaints against Officer Sullivan. The Police Review Board hasn't recommended discipline in 3 years. The proper channels are exactly why we're here tonight." She turned to face the packed room. "How many of you have stories like mine?" she asked. "How many have been harassed, profiled, arrested for existing while black or brown in public spaces?" Dozens of hands went up, then dozens more. Soon, nearly half the room had their hands raised. "Each of those hands represents a failure of this city to protect its citizens," Evelyn said. "Each is a violation of the oath these officers took." The mayor tried to regain control. "Senator Washington, what exactly are you asking for?" he asked. "Immediate suspension of all officers involved in today's incident pending a federal investigation," Evelyn began. "Termination of Margaret Thornton for discrimination and filing false reports. Independent oversight of the police department with real power to discipline officers, and mandatory retraining on constitutional rights and de-escalation for every officer in the department." "That's impossible," Foster protested from her seat. "Then I'll make it possible through state legislation," Evelyn replied. "And if the city won't act, the Department of Justice will. I've already been in contact with the Civil Rights Division. They're very interested in what happened here today." The mention of federal investigation sent a ripple of panic through the city officials. Federal oversight would mean years of monitoring, millions in compliance costs, and career-ending scrutiny. "We can handle this internally," the mayor pleaded. "You've had years to handle it internally," Evelyn responded. "Your handling is why we're here. The time for internal solutions has passed." The crowd erupted in applause. Chants of "justice now" filled the chamber. The city council members looked at each other helplessly, realizing they had no choice but to act. The council chamber was still buzzing with energy an hour after the official hearing ended. Evelyn stood in the lobby, surrounded by reporters and community members. But her attention was drawn to Officer Martinez, who lingered near the exit, clearly wanting to approach but hesitant. "Officer Martinez," Evelyn called out, causing him to freeze. "You wanted to say something?" Martinez walked over slowly, his uniform seeming to weigh heavily on his shoulders. "Senator Washington, I need to apologize," he said quietly. "I should have done more. I knew it was wrong, but I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" Evelyn asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Of ending up like Thompson, Martinez said, then immediately looked like he regretted the words. Who's Thompson? Evelyn pressed. Evelyn. Nobody, Martinez said quickly, backing away. I've said too much. I'm sorry again, Senator. He hurried out before she could ask more questions. Jennifer appeared at Evelyn's elbow with a tablet. Senator, you need to see this, she said urgently. The City Council just released their preliminary decision. Evelyn read the official statement aloud for the gathered reporters. Following tonight's emergency hearing, the City Council has voted to place Officer Brett Sullivan and Sergeant Rachel Hoffman on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Security Officer Dennis Cooper's contract with the library has been suspended. Head Librarian Margaret Thornton has been placed on paid administrative leave while an independent review is conducted. Paid leave? Patricia said incredulously from nearby. That's barely a slap on the wrist. It's a start, Evelyn said diplomatically, though she shared Patricia's frustration. The key word is pending. This isn't over. Maya Rodriguez pushed through the crowd, her phone extended. Senator, I just received something interesting, she said. An anonymous email with an attachment. It's a partial screenshot of a text conversation between Sullivan and someone saved in his phone as RC. Look at this message from 3 weeks ago. Evelyn read the message on Maya's screen. Sullivan had written, The Washington Heights operation went perfectly. Moving to Riverside Library next. The quota system is working better than we discussed. Quota system, Evelyn said sharply. What quota system? And who is RC? That's all that was in the screenshot, Maya said. But whoever sent this says there's more. They're scared to release everything at once. Thomas Chen approached the group, having waited patiently for the reporters to thin out. Senator Washington, there's something you should know, he said carefully. I serve on the city's finance committee. 3 months ago, we approved a contract with a company called Riverside Corrections Corp. They're a private prison company. Let me guess, Evelyn said, pieces clicking together. RC? Riverside Corrections. Chen nodded gravely. The contract includes occupancy guarantees, he continued. The city has to maintain certain arrest numbers or pay penalties. They're arresting people to fill quotas for a private prison company? Maya said, already typing notes into her phone. This is huge. It's speculation without proof, Chen cautioned. The contract is all perfectly legal on paper, but the timing is suspicious. The arrest increases started right after the contract was signed. Evelyn's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She read it, her expression darkening. Security footage from the library, she announced. 10 minutes are missing from this afternoon's recording. 3:20 to 3:30 p.m., right when the police arrived. Conveniently corrupted? Maya asked. Or deliberately deleted, Evelyn said. Jennifer, can we get our IT experts to try recovering it? Already on it, Jennifer said, typing on her tablet. But if it was professionally wiped, we might not get anything. Harold, the elderly man from the library, approached hesitantly. Senator, I overheard something during the hearing, he said quietly. When Hoffman was on her phone, she mentioned something about cleaning up the community center situation before anyone noticed. I don't know what that means, but it sounded important. Evelyn made a note in her phone. The Riverside Community Center? She asked. That's the one, Harold confirmed. She seemed pretty urgent about it. Deputy Chief Foster appeared in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Senator Washington, a word? She requested. Evelyn followed her to a quieter corner. Foster glanced around nervously before speaking. I'm not supposed to tell you this, Foster said quietly, But there's going to be an internal review that goes deeper than what was announced tonight. Some of us have been documenting things for months, waiting for the right moment. Why now? Evelyn asked. Because you survived it and can tell the story, Foster said simply. Others weren't so fortunate. There's a file. I can't give it to you directly, but if someone were to request records from cases numbered 2019 to 347 through 398, they might find interesting patterns. Before Evelyn could respond, Foster walked away, leaving her with more questions than answers. Outside the building, the crowd was slowly dispersing into the warm evening air. Parents carried sleeping children. Activists made plans for follow-up protests, and reporters rushed to file their stories. But Evelyn noticed something odd. A black sedan had been parked across the street throughout the hearing, its engine running, windows tinted too dark to see inside. As she watched, it pulled away slowly. No license plate visible in the dim streetlight. "Senator," Jennifer said, appearing beside her, "your office received a package during the hearing. No return address." She handed Evelyn a manila envelope. Inside was a single flash drive and a note that read, "Thompson tried to expose this. Look what happened to him. Be careful. The library was just testing grounds." "Who's Thompson?" Jennifer asked, reading over her shoulder. "That's what I need to find out," Evelyn said, pocketing the flash drive. "But not tonight. Tonight, we've won a small victory." "Small?" Jennifer asked. "Administrative leave isn't justice," Evelyn replied. "It's just the system protecting itself while it figures out how to minimize damage. Real change requires more pressure, more evidence, more public attention." Her phone rang. The caller ID showed the governor's office. She let it go to voicemail. There would be time for political maneuvering tomorrow. Tonight, she needed to process what had happened, what was still happening, and what might be coming. As they walked to the parking garage, Evelyn noticed Martinez's patrol car still in the lot, though he was nowhere to be seen. On the windshield was a parking ticket, which was odd since official vehicles were exempt. She walked closer and realized it wasn't a ticket at all, but a note tucked under the wiper. The note contained just one line. "Check the basement archives. November 2019. Officer Thompson's last report." Evelyn looked around the empty garage, shadows dancing in the fluorescent lighting. Whoever was feeding her information was taking serious risks. The question was whether they were trying to help her or lead her into something worse. "Senator, we should go," Jennifer urged, noticing her unease. As they drove away, Evelyn's phone buzzed with one final text for the night. No number, just a message. "You think you won tonight, but Riverside Corrections has contracts in 14 cities. The library was small stakes. Ask yourself why Thompson transferred to another state 3 days before he was supposed to testify." The text disappeared from her phone seconds after she read it, leaving no trace it had ever existed.